Have you ever wanted to prove something is true by starting out assuming it's false? It sounds kind of weird, right? Almost like a paradox, but it's actually one of the most powerful and honestly one of the coolest tools in all of logic and math. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on this backdoor way of thinking, the indirect proof.
So you're probably thinking, how on earth does that even work? How can starting with a falsehood possibly lead you to the truth? Well, it might feel a little backwards, but this technique, which also goes by the name proof by contradiction, is like a secret weapon for mathematicians, programmers, basically anyone who deals in logic. So let's break it down.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we're going to start with the absolute fundamentals, the if-then statement and its family. Then, we'll figure out which of those family members we can actually trust. After that, we'll unlock something called the law of contraposition. That's the real key to all of this. And finally, we'll watch the whole thing come together in a pretty slick geometric proof. Ready? Let's dive in.
Okay, so first things first. Everything we're talking about today is built on one simple idea, the if-then statement. You use it all the time. If I finish my work, then I can watch a movie. But what you might not know is that this simple statement has, well, it's got a whole family of variations, and getting to know them is absolutely crucial.
So let's meet the family. First up, you've got the original conditional, if P, then Q. Pretty straightforward. Then you have the converse, which just flips it around. If Q, then P. The inverse throws some knots in there. If not P, then not Q. And finally, the contrapositive does both. It flips and it negates. If not Q, then not P. Got it? These four are our essential building blocks.
Now, let's put this to a real-world test. The conditional statement, if Tom lives in San Diego, he lives in California. Yeah, that's absolutely true, right? No-brainer. But what about its converse? If Tom lives in California, he lives in San Diego. Whoa, hold on a second. He could be in LA, right? Or San Francisco. So here's our first big takeaway. Just because a statement is true, that doesn't mean its converse is true.
And you know what? The inverse runs into the same exact problem. If Tom doesn't live in San Diego, he doesn't live in California. Nope, again, he could be anywhere else in the state. But check this out. The contrapositive. If Tom doesn't live in California, then he definitely doesn't live in San Diego. Now that is rock solid. Are you seeing the pattern here? The original true statement and its contrapositive are a perfect match.
So what does all this mean? It means not all these logical statements are created equal. Some of them are kind of like funhouse smears. They distort the original truth. But some are a perfect reflection. And those are the ones we're really interested in. And this brings us to a golden rule in logic. A conditional statement and its contrapositive are two sides of the exact same coin. We call this logically equivalent. If one is true, the other is guaranteed to be true. If one's false, the other's got to be false too. This little fact right here is the secret ingredient for everything we're about to do. But why? Why does this always work? Well, this diagram makes it super clear. If P, then Q just means that circle P is completely inside the bigger circle Q. So now think about the contrapositive. If not Q, then not P. Well, if you pick a spot anywhere outside the big circle Q, is there any possible way you could be inside that little circle P? Of course not. It's impossible. It's the exact same logic, just looked at from a different angle.
Let's try another one, this time from geometry. It's a fact. If two angles are vertical, they are congruent. True. So now, let's flip it and negate it to get the contrapositive. If two angles are not congruent, then they are not vertical. Also 100% true. See? It works like a charm every single time. This is a rule you can bank on.
Now this powerful connection actually has a formal name, the law of contraposition. And this law is what lets us do that backdoor reasoning we talked about at the very beginning. It's the engine that lets us work backwards from an outcome to figure out what must have caused it. Let's see how we can use it.
Okay, time for a quick logic puzzle. I'm going to give you two pieces of information, and you have to accept them both as completely true. Fact number one, the rule. If Matt cleans his room, then he will go to the movie. Fact number two, the result, Matt does not get to go to the movie.
So, using only those two facts, what can we say for sure about the state of Matt's room? Take a second, think it through.
The only possible logical conclusion is Matt did not clean his room. Why? Well, think about it. The rule says if he had cleaned it, he would be at the movies. But we know for a fact he's not at the movies.
Therefore, the first part couldn't have happened. He didn't clean his room. That's the law of contraposition in action.
Okay, so we've got our tools, we understand the if-then family, and we've harnessed the amazing power of the contrapositive. Now, it is time for the main event. Let's finally introduce the star of our show, the indirect proof.
So here's the secret sauce. In an indirect proof, you start by assuming that the very thing you want to prove is actually false. You temporarily step into an alternate reality. Then, you just follow that assumption down the logical rabbit hole until, bam, you hit a dead end, a complete contradiction. And if your starting assumption leads you to something that's logically impossible, well, that first assumption just had to be wrong. So when do you pull out this clever trick? Well, it's perfect for proving negative statements, like showing that one thing is not equal to another. And honestly, it's an absolute lifesaver when trying to prove something directly is just super messy or complicated. Think of it as a logical escape hatch.
All right, enough talk. It's time to put all of this together. We are going to tackle a classic geometry problem using our new favorite tool, the indirect proof. We have all the pieces of the puzzle, so let's see this thing in action.
Okay, here's the setup. We're given two planes, P and Q, that are perfectly parallel to each other. Then a third plane, T, comes along and slices through both of them. Where it cuts through, it creates two lines, line L and line M. Our mission is to prove that line L and line M have to be parallel to each other. Now, a direct proof could get tricky, but an indirect proof makes this a piece of cake.
Step 1, we assume the exact opposite of what we want to prove. So let's just pretend for a minute that line L and line M are not parallel. Okay, so what would that imply? Well, if you have two lines that are in the same plane and they aren't parallel, they have to cross somewhere, right? So let's call that point where they intersect point A.
Now let's think about this point A. Since it's on line L, it has to be part of plane P. And since it's also on line M, it must be part of plane Q. So wait a minute. This one single point, point A, exists on both plane P and plane Q. But if two planes share even one point, that means the planes themselves have to intersect. And there it is. That's our aha moment. That's the contradiction. The problem started by telling us that P and Q are parallel. And by definition, parallel planes can never ever intersect.
So our little assumption, our trip into an alternate reality where the lines weren't parallel, led us to a conclusion that is completely impossible. Therefore, that initial assumption has to be false. And if the idea that the lines are not parallel is false, well, what's the only thing left? They must be parallel. And just like that, the proof is done.
And that is the absolute magic of an indirect proof. You prove something is true by showing that every other alternative is impossible. And think about it, you actually use this kind of backdoor reasoning all the time. When you're troubleshooting why your internet is out, you're eliminating possibilities. When you're solving a Sudoku puzzle, you're figuring out what a number can't be. So my question to you is, where else in your life are you using this powerful logical tool without even knowing it?